This week's Grimm Fairytales, we have a few more stories. Domestic Servants. Whither goest thou? To Wapple. I to Wapple, thou to Wapple. So, together we'll go. Hast thou a man? What is his name? Cham. My man Cham, thy mam Cham. I to Wapple, thou to Wapple. So, together we'll go. Hast thou a child? How is he styled? Wild? My child wild? Thy child wild, my man Cham, thy mam Cham. I to Wapple, thou to Wapple. So, together we'll go. Hast thou a cradle? How callest thou thy cradle? Hippodadle? My cradle hippodadle? My child wild, thy child wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Wapple, thou to Wapple. So, together we'll go. Hast thou also a drudge? What name has thy drudge? From thy work to not budge, my drudge. From thy work to not budge, my child wild, thy child wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Wapple, thou to Wapple. So, together we'll go. The next story. The Thief and His Master. Hans wished to put his son to learn a trade, so he went into the church and prayed to our Lord God to know which would be most advantageous for him. Then the clerk got behind the altar and said, "Thieving, thieving." On this, Hans goes back to his son and tells him he is to learn thieving, and that the Lord God had said so. So he goes with his son to seek a man who is acquainted with thieving. They walk a long time and come into a great forest, where stands a little house with an old woman in it. Hans says, "Do you know of a man who is acquainted with thieving?"
"You can learn that here quite well," said the woman. "My son is a master of it."
So he speaks with the son and asks if he knows thieving really well. The master thief says, "I will teach him well. Come back when a year is over, and then if you recognize your son, I will take no payment at all for teaching him. But if you don't know him, you must give me $200. The father goes home again, and the son learns witchcraft and thieving thoroughly. When the year is out, the father is full of anxiety to know how he is to contrive to recognize his son. As he is thus going about in his trouble, he meets a little dwarf who says,
"Man, what ails you, that you are always in such trouble?"
"Oh," says Hans, "a year ago I placed my son with a master thief, who told me I was to come back when the year was out, and if then I did not know my son, when I saw him, I was to pay him $200. But if I did know him, I was to pay nothing. And now I am afraid of not knowing him and can't tell where I'm to get the money." Then the dwarf tells him to take a small basket of bread with him, and to stand beneath the chimney.
"There on the crossbeam is a basket, out of which a little bird is peeping, and that is your son."
Hans goes thither and throws a little basket full of black bread in front of the basket with the bird in it, and the little bird comes out and looks up. "Hello, my son, art thou there?" says the father, and the son is delighted to see his father, but the master thief says, "The devil must have prompted you, or how could you have known your son?" "Father, let us go," said the youth. Then the father and son set out homeward. On the way, a carriage comes driving by. Hereupon the son says to his father, "I will change myself into a large greyhound, and then you can earn a great deal of money by me." Then the gentleman calls from the carriage, "My man, will you sell your dog?" "Yes," says the father. "How much do you want for it?" $30. "Hey, man, that is a great deal. But as it is such a very fine dog, I will have it." The gentleman takes it into his carriage, but when they have driven a little farther, the dog springs out of the carriage through the window and goes back to his father. and is no longer a greyhound. They go home together. Next day there is a fair in the neighboring town, so the youth says to his father, "I will now change myself into a beautiful horse, and you can sell me. But when you have sold me, you must take off my bridle, or I cannot become a man again." Then the father goes with the horse to the fair, and the master thief comes and buys the horse for $100. But the father forgets and does not take off the bridle. So the man goes home with the horse and puts it in his stable. When the maid crosses the threshold, the horse says, "Take off my bridle, take off my bridle." Then the maid stands still and says, "What? Canst thou speak?" So she goes and takes the bridle off, and the horse becomes a sparrow, and flies out at the door, and the wizard becomes a sparrow also and flies after him. Then they come together and cast lots, but the master loses and betakes himself to the water and is a fish. Then the youth also becomes a fish, and they cast lots again, and the master loses. So the master changes himself into a cock, and the youth becomes a fox, and bites the master's head off. And he died, and has remained dead to this day. The next story is The Wise Servant. How fortunate is the master, and how well all goes in his house, when he has a wise servant who listens to his orders and does not obey them, but prefers following his own wisdom. A clever John of this kind was once sent out by his master to seek a lost cow. He stayed away a long time, and the master thought, "Faithful John does not spare any pains over his work." As, however, he did not come back at all, the master was afraid lest some misfortune had befallen him, and set out himself to look for him. He had to search a long time, but at last he perceived the boy who was running up and down a large field. "Now, dear John," said the master when he had got up to him, "hast thou found the cow which I sent thee to seek?" "No, master," he answered, "I have not found the cow, but then I have not looked for it." "Then what hast thou looked for, John?" "Something better, and that luckily I have found." "What is it, John?" "3 blackbirds," answered the boy. "And where are they?" asked the master. "I see one of them, I hear the other, and I am running after the third," answered the boy. "Take example by this. Do not trouble yourself about your masters or their orders, but rather do what comes into your head and pleases you, and then you will act just as wisely as prudent John." The Seven Swabians. 7 Swabians were once together. The first was Master Scholes, the second Jackley, and the third Marley, the fourth Jurgli, and the fifth Michael, the sixth Hans, and seventh Vitil. All 7 had made up their minds to travel about the world to seek adventures and perform great deeds. But in order that they might go in security and with arms in their hands, they thought it would be advisable that they should have one solitary but very strong and very long spear made for them. The spear all 7 of them took in their hands at once. In front walked the boldest and bravest, and that was Master Scholes, and the others followed in a row, and Vetley was the last. Then it came to pass one day in the haymaking month, July, when they had walked a long distance and still had a long way to go before they reached the village where they were to pass the night, that as they were in a meadow in the twilight, a great beetle or hornet flew by them from behind a bush and hummed in a menacing manner. Master Scholes was so terrified that he all but dropped the spear, and a cold perspiration broke out over his whole body. "Hark, hark!" cried he to his comrades. "Good heavens, I hear a drum!" Jackley, who was behind him holding the spear, and who perceived some kind of a smell, said, "Something is most certainly going on, for I taste powder and matches." At these words, Master Scholes began to take to flight, and in a trice jumped over a hedge. But as he just happened to jump onto the teeth of a rake, which had been left lying there after the haymaking. The handle of it struck his face and gave him a tremendous blow.
"Oh dear, oh dear," screamed Master Scholes. "Take me prisoner, I surrender, I surrender."
The other 6 all leapt over, one on the top of the other, crying,
"If you surrender, I surrender too. If you surrender, I surrender too."
At length, as no enemy was there to bind and take them away, they saw that they had been mistaken, and in order that the story might not be known, and they be treated as fools and ridiculed, they all swore to each other to hold their peace about it until one of them accidentally spoke of it. Then they journeyed onwards. The second danger which they survived cannot be compared with the first. Some days afterward, their path led them through a fallow field, where a hare was sitting sleeping in the sun. Her ears were standing straight up, and her great glassy eyes were wide open. All of them were alarmed at the sight of the horrible wild beast, and they consulted together as to what it would be the least dangerous to do. For if they were to run away, they knew that the monster would pursue and swallow them whole. So they said,
"We must go through a great and dangerous struggle. Boldly ventured is half won."
And all 7 grasped the spear, Master Scholes in front and Vedley behind. Master Scholes was always trying to keep the spear back, but Vedley had become quite brave while behind, and wanted to dash forward, and cried,
"Strike home in every Swabian's name, or else I wish he may be lame."
But Hans knew how to meet this and said,
"Thunder and lightning is fine to prate, but for dragon hunting thou I too late."
Michael cried,
"Nothing is wanting, not even a hair. Be sure the devil himself is there."
Then it was Jurgely's turn to speak.
"If it be not, it at least his mother, or else it's the devil's own step-brother."
And now Marley had a bright thought and said to Vetley,
"Advance, Vetley, advance, advance, and I behind will hold the lance."
Vetley, however, did not attend to that, and Jackley said,
"'Tis Scholes' place the first to be. No one deserves that honor but he."
Then Master Scholes plucked up his courage and said gravely,
"Then let us boldly advance to the fight, and thus we shall show our valor and might."
Hereupon they all together set on the dragon. Master Scholes crossed himself and prayed for God's assistance. But as all this was of no avail, and he was getting nearer and nearer to the enemy, he screamed,
"Oh ho! Oh ho! Ho ho!"
in the greatest anguish. This awakened the hare, which in great alarm darted swiftly away. When Master Scholes saw her thus flying from the field of battle, he cried in his joy,
"Quick, Vetley, quick! Look there, the monster's nothing but a hare."
But the Swabian allies went in search of further adventures, and came to the Moselle, a mossy, quite deep river over which there are few bridges, and which in many places people have to cross in boats. As the 7 Swabians did not know this, they called to a man who was working on the opposite side of the river, to know how people contrived to get across. The distance and their way of speaking made the man unable to understand what they wanted, and he said, What? In the way people speak in the neighborhood of Treves. Master Scholes thought he was saying, Wade through the water. And as he was the first, began to set out and went into the Moselle. It was not long before he sank in the mud and the deep waves which drove against him, but his hat was blown on the opposite shore by the wind, and a frog sat down beside it and croaked.
Wah, wah, wah.
The other 6 on the opposite side heard that and said,
"Oh ho, comrades, Master Scholes is calling us. If he can wade across, why cannot we?"
So they all jumped into the water together in a great hurry, and were drowned. And thus one frog took the lives of all 6 of them, and not one of the Swabian allies ever reached home again.